Hello and welcome. Madeline Goudeseune, Tom Cook, thank you guys for joining me. I appreciate we're coming from San Diego and UK as well. So again, another global conversation. This is interesting. You both got some really interesting connecting the dots and we're going to walk and talk through. So let's get straight into it. We'll start off. Madeline, connect the dots for us from early in your career to where you are today.
Yeah, well, first, thanks for having me. Let's see, where do I start? So, early career, I went into the question of what do you want to be when you grow up, and it does not look anything like what I'm doing today. So I started down a path where I thought I was going to be a pharmacist. It was a family thing. It fit, I guess, some of my strengths. However, got into it, hated it. I knew I was headed towards something I didn't want to do. Had a little bit of a like early on, like, what am I going to do now? And I fell back on something that came very natural to me. I am type 1 diabetic. I've had it since I was 12 years old. So health and taking care of myself was something that, to be quite honest, was forced on me at a very young age. However, learned to really embrace that and love it, if you will, and wanted to help others be healthy. That was part of the like, I don't want to just give people pills to take care of things, but how can I help them earlier on take care of themselves so we don't actually get to that point? So the proactive approach. Um, so I ended up down a path, went to grad school in Washington, D.C. In health promotion management, and thought I was going to be going into like corporate wellness programs. Got my hands in that, and I did a couple research projects along the way, and ended up getting my first job in something I also had no, I'll say, interest in doing at first, in public policy analysis for the American Council on Exercise. So packed my bags up, said yes to a cool opportunity, moved all the way across the country in a car with my mom, helping, and kind of went down that path. And after a few years, it was the, okay, this isn't making my heart sing. It's really slow. What do I do
Public
now?
policy, slow, really.
Yeah, I know. You never would guess. So from there, really like naturally, I had a really good boss and support system where I worked, fell into like the operational side of things, business operations, project management, that sort of role. Did that for many years and then actually stepped out of the health and wellness space for a couple of years and got into more the HR side of things. So kind of my background in doing project management for leadership development programs, things of that nature. And I got about a year in and then COVID hit. So I found myself laid off. And I also knew where I was, kind of at. I wasn't particularly passionate, or as we say here, sometimes like drinking the Kool-Aid for the mission of the company. And I was like, I really like this health stuff. How do I get back into that? Ended up back at the American Council on Exercise, and this time doing something that I really, really, really loved, developing out career development programs, really supporting health and fitness professionals as they were getting started with health coaching, personal training, that side of things. So, helping, what's a mentor? How do I stay relevant in the profession? How do I network? Those sorts of questions, resumes, everything under the sun. I did that for a few years. WIFA, as you kind of came into play, Women in Fitness Association. So we had a hand in that, in really trying to focus on bringing, we'll say, gender balance into the industry. So that was a big focus while I was there. And then along the way, I went through a lot of transition, became a mother, among other things. And I was at another kind of pivot point in my career. Kind of fast forward to now, I ended up leaving my job and taking on, again, another thing I never expected, very squiggly in a sense, doing career coaching. So now I actually work at two different companies and I'm doing more portfolio style work, which is really interesting and a cool opportunity at two different places. So on one side, I work with people who have been laid off, helping them find what's next, that next chapter, and supporting them through that journey. And Cleo, the other company I work at, which really feels like the right fit, if that makes sense. I work with caregivers is the best way to put it. Everything from preconception, we're thinking about trying to start a family to the end of the spectrum now with the end of life caregiving. We are seeing a huge uptick in people who are doing this kind of sandwich caregiving, they
Mm.
call it. So potentially even caring for both sides of that. So I help support people through, you know, all different topics. So how do I balance work and taking care of my family, taking care of myself, to anything from that to I need to talk to my manager about how this is affecting me. How do I have this conversation? How do I support my team? All different sorts of questions. So yeah, that's my background
Love
in a
it.
nutshell.
I love the fact that I don't think anyone that's in the current day and age has got a linear, career path. Like, 20 years ago, you started in one thing and you just kept in that one thing. You're like everybody else. And of course, we'll get to Tom as well, where we've all been there on multiple companies and multiple jobs. And I also love the fact that you avoided the landmine that is now DEI. Gender balance. You're right that we want to get to, but somehow those words have become like dirty words. So it's kind of
Mhm.
crazy, but we'll come back to that in a little bit. Tom, connect the dots for us because you've got a great career as well, and likewise, not a linear one either. So talk us through the connections, those dots.
I don't know. I mean, it's a great intro, Madeline. But yeah, so again, thanks for having me. It started for me actually in the US. So kind of went through school, didn't really know what I was doing. Variations to what I thought I was good at, a little bit of science, a little bit of practical, a little bit of psychology. So ended up going to University of Jamestown up in North Dakota, initially on an exercise science degree, but with a main passion for playing football. I was out there to play soccer, and that was the reason I went. So a bit of a different journey, I suppose. Small town America, which was incredible. I mean, a year into that, exercise science. Initially, it wasn't really a thing in the US. So, right at the start of the degree, it was actually like a foundation. In the US, your degree is quite different. It's generally 4 years. The first year is very general, potential to move more than you have in the UK. So I actually started out as a PE teacher, was the degree. They didn't have exercise science at the university. One term in, I was like, this is ridiculous. I don't want to be a PE teacher. I like the sciencey stuff, the psychological stuff more. So let's go into biology and let's see what that is. Realized very quickly I'm just not good enough at calculus to get through that. So that moved me really quickly. And we just had somebody join the university. And I don't think this really happens in the UK, but just had somebody who had a background in exercise science. And the way it works in the US is you do different courses that have different amounts of points and credits, and you kind of make your own degree. You've got a bit more flexibility in what you're choosing in lots of the courses. So I'd kind of done quite a lot of the sort of exercise sciencey stuff that would make up that combination. And there was other courses that were there. We were probably 3 or 4 courses short of actually having an exercise science degree that was accredited. So I helped build that. So I helped kind of found that with the university, if you like, mainly because I wanted that myself. But ended up going on a journey with that alongside doing some leadership work. They had a character and leadership course, which was one of the most incredible things I did actually. But the combination of that transpired into me essentially doing graduating with exercise science with a specialism in cardiac rehab. Um, Bunch of stuff then in terms of did I stay in the US? Did I come back? Long story short, I came back to the UK. Back and forth on a couple of different jobs, but moved quite quickly into a role with AXA as a physiologist. So I was delivering health screening on site, namely because, I mean, if we roll back to, from where I am today to back then, um, I really enjoyed being a cardiac physiologist, supporting people post cardiac event in primary interventions in a quite high risk, fragile environment was great for me. I loved it. But I lived in a place where the nearest rehab centre to me was about an hour away. So the irony of me being in digital health now, and actually the big move for me was that I had to travel an hour each way to get to a role that at the time was voluntary, and I just couldn't afford it. So that's probably the biggest link to digitization of healthcare and my move into that and passion for that. But with AXA, it was a lot of on-site health screening, corporate wellbeing programs. So over 4 years there, I got to a point where I was building, creating, and evaluating wellbeing programs with some amazing people. I mean, Dr. Chris Tompkins, was the builder of this unit within AXA Proactive Health. Ali Khan, who was the innovation officer, who did some incredible stuff, has just co-founded the World Flourishing Organization for corporate work, and they're doing some amazing stuff, and too many people to name. But at the time, we had a collaboration with a Danish coaching company called Lever Healthcare, who were looking to come into the UK. We were moving into kind of corporate coaching, so it was a natural kind of fit. Lever outsourced all of their coaching delivery to AXA at the time. So I after 4 years, jumped ship to Lever it was a role called clinical services manager, but it was essentially to help build out their coaching team, which we did in a really cool way. So I got super close with the UK Health Coaching Association. Isabella Natrins, who's still the CEO of that organization. So coaching, similarly to Madeline, has played a really, really strong part in my growth and development. The broader ambition for Lever was essentially to get into the NHS. And so we had an initial pilot, we broadened our scope, helped the NHS kind of create national frameworks for weight management, diabetes prevention, diabetes remission, and the medicated weight management program alongside Saxenda and the likes. COVID in that period meant that I moved across to Copenhagen for a year, so had the experience of living there, which was exceptional, great place, a place I really wanted to stay, to be honest. But with some company changes, a lot of the revenues coming from the UK. We had a Danish business development manager and an English business development manager, and the Danish one had to stay in Denmark, and I came back to head up business development. In a bunch of different ways. It didn't quite work out when I came back, unfortunately. So left there not really knowing what I was going to do. Ended up in a role with Orca. So they do a lot of review and accreditation of health apps and technologies, very much with a focus on taking their value proposition out to the US and pharma. So we spent quite a lot of time in New York, Boston, East Coast kind of pharma companies, which again was a great experience, like just incredible to see how things operated there. In reality, the product probably wasn't quite ready. There were some commercial challenges with the business and things like that. So left there quite quickly after 6 months and joined Quiddity, where I'm a kind of hybrid account director, commercial director, and head of new business and partnerships. So we essentially work with digital health companies around the world that are looking to enter the UK, whether that be an ambition for the NHS, whether it be NHS Scotland, whether it be local authorities or government funding, whether it be private hospitals or private insurers. We do a lot of work on supporting those companies coming into the market. So very fortunate to have a good portfolio of actually both femtech companies that I'm working with, which we'll get onto later on, but also kind of looking at how do we start to differentiate between all of this innovation that's happening and which stuff do we want to take a bit of a chance and a bit of a bet on. So, a bit VC-like in how we're operating, I suppose, in that respect. So, yeah, that's where I am today.
Interesting. You're missing out one thing, though, the refereeing angle. Give me some context on that, because this is interesting, and I want to know if there's any gender balance in your refereeing.
Yeah, so I started refereeing when I was 14. It paid more than the paper round was the reality of it. So would go out on a Sunday, got paid pretty good money at the time, for what we did. Something that I've always kind of kept a foot in with, while playing. I'd often play on a Saturday, played to a quite decent level, in the UK and in the US, of course. Refereed a little bit while I was in the US as well. It got to a point when I came back and, going into the sports side of things in the US, the sports system, I got used to being a pro athlete. I got used to training 4 or 5 hours a day. I got used to ice baths after every session. I get used to being up at 6 a.m. for training on your lunch, training in the evening, going back to school 6 weeks early to do pre-season, proper fitness testing, best shape I'd been in my entire life, and got used to operating at 95, 100% of what my potential was. And then you come back to the UK and I wasn't a professional athlete, and all of a sudden operating at 70 to 80%. I'm all or nothing in everything I do, and I just couldn't function, and I didn't enjoy it, and I found it frustrating, and I lost my enjoyment for the game. So I was still refereeing to a decent level, had quite high potential, so decided to take up refereeing as a more serious thing, I suppose. And that was around 23, so a little under 10 years ago, and I've just been on a pathway since. And again, it hasn't been an upward trajectory. Now I'm an assistant referee on the Football League 1 and 2, and in the development pathway for the Championship and the Premier League, which is incredible to be involved in the sport at that level. Going out in front of 25, 30,000 people every week now on a Saturday after doing the day job in the week is quite mind blowing, and still have to pinch myself sometimes. But there was a point in time halfway through that journey that I was getting a lot of hype, young, exciting talent, and ultimately wasn't performing, wasn't taking it seriously. So I actually got
Right.
kicked off the levels of refereeing as such, which then took me on a pathway of being an assistant referee, which reset lots of things, some resilience and mental challenges I was going through at that point, which is now kind of framed where I am now, where it's a chunky commitment. It's probably 20, 30 hours a week, on
Wow.
top of what I'm doing with Quiddity. What you mentioned, Madeline, about time management and trying to kind of find my own way with that is where I'm at the moment. I've dropped my hours a bit at Quiddity to give me some flexibility, and fortunate that I've got a boss that's super supportive of that. But yeah, it's a tough balance to strike, and the funding isn't there for me to go full time at the moment. I'm fortunate that I've got a job that I'm quite successful in, so it's a tricky balance to try and figure out when the right time to make certain decisions
Yeah.
might be, around that. And I'm kind of in that sweet spot of, in the next 2 years, I'll either jump up and go all the way and Premier League and potentially international stuff, or I'll kind of settle into where I am, and that kind of ship will sail, and I'll be comfortable with that, and I'm still involved in the pro game, and that'll be what it is. So it's just kind of managing both those things, and being honest with myself about what I can commit to that, as well as all the other things you have in life. I don't have kids, but do have a partner and a family and all the other bits and pieces,
Yeah.
that you have to commit to and deliver to enjoy life to its fullest across the board. So yeah, that's that side of it. And probably also worth me saying, super passionate about mentoring. So, I do quite a lot of work with young clinicians who are considering career paths and moving out of medicine and clinical practice into business. Do a lot of work with kind of young founders of businesses, both through Quiddity and personally as well. And similar to what Madeline said, that coaching piece is a real passion project of mine, that I just really get my buzz from. So and that
Yeah.
also keeps me busy.
It does. I've no doubt it does. I'm loving the I suppose the passion, I suppose, as well as the interest and the investment that's going up right now in women's sport and in the football in particular. The UK, the English Lionesses are killing it the last number of years, right? They're
Yeah.
just absolutely killing it. And obviously we're heading into a year of rugby World Cup, but again, there's huge investment and huge opportunity there. So, if nothing else, you should come over to the women's side of the industry. I think it's on the uplift. And I was lucky enough last year to be in the US during the rise of the basketball, Madeline and Caitlin Clark, and that whole March Madness, as you call it, which obviously we're in the middle of right now. It was just
Uh-huh.
phenomenal to watch, absolutely phenomenal. And again, great investments. Finally, it's definitely on the uptick. Huge media coverage and a lot of big space there. So it's one to watch for sure, for sure. And I think this is the beauty for me. It's the opportunities in sport are increasing. Like we all started in some way in the health side and kind of weird to sport and kind of come back in different ways. But I'm looking forward to seeing some more of this. So Tom, we'll hold court. Yes, that there's an opportunity for full time in refereeing. It might just be on the female side of of the game.
Well, and they are doing a really good job with, lots of the women and girls that I've worked with, in refereeing now are on the Premier League, are on internationals, and are on TV week in, week out, delivering as part of the men's game in the men's pathway. We have a women's pathway that, of course, gives different opportunities, and keeping that gender balance there in terms of men operating on the women's pathway. They're quite different games.
Yeah,
But I think, a lot of what something that struck me when I was in the US was there was always a rule that you had to have as many men's teams as as many women's teams as men's teams, or, I said that as men's teams versus women's teams, always put the men first, right? But
yeah,
the
default.
gender balance had to be there. You have to have the same amount of teams. So if and there's varying sports, NFL, you perhaps wouldn't have a women's team, but you might have a women's wrestling team or a women's volleyball team or something very
Mm,
different in that respect. We were fortunate with the football and soccer side of things. We had a men's and women's teams. We'd always travel together. You'd get the benefit of, kind of sharing that experience with those people, and as committed, as good, as skillful. And I'm just really glad now that the opportunities are there. I
yeah,
think the challenges around pay equity and revenue generations and stuff pose their own conversations, but the opportunity thing is the bit for me.
yeah,
Get the opportunity piece there, get the role models in play, and it's not just gender; it's all of the other diversifications that we're looking to achieve. But now we've got visibility of those role models. Whoever you are, whatever you are as a kid, you're generally seeing more and more of anybody that you want to be in the
right.
limelight, succeeding,
Yeah.
and that for me is a really special thing. So
Yeah, we're definitely getting there. We've a bit of work to do yet because I'm conscious that like the US soccer team were winning World Cups from more than once, and they were still not getting paid even fractionally close to what the men's team, who didn't even qualify for the for the World Cup a couple of times. So there's definitely a journey to be had, and I know more to be had. But Madeline, you obviously did an awful lot of work with the WEFA, the Women in Fitness Association as well. So again, from those employed in the world of fitness and sport and physical activity, give us a little bit of context of what that is or was and where, like, what's the differences? Likewise, why is it needed? Why is there a Women in Fitness Association needed, whereas there isn't a Men in Fitness Association needed? Give us some context from that side of the table.
Oh, that is a great question. Women in Fitness Association. I had mentioned I, kind of took over that while I was at ACE. Started on its own. Really started by a woman. Brought other women together. The whole point was to help you grow your network and support each other and have that mentorship and those pieces. Because the reality of the situation is there was and still is a huge gap in women leadership in almost every industry across the board, especially as you move up into the C-suite. I won't dive too much into it, but just so many things that factor into that. And you mentioned like the dirty DEI aspect, but that's really what it was. And when you look at, we'll say biases in the workplace and things like that, it's so-and-so is already in a leadership position, so they're looking for someone like them to fill their spot or to join their team, what have you. And so they're looking for these certain characteristics or someone who's like them. And oftentimes, if it's a man, it's going to be another man. So that was a huge part of what it was, and really just helping women empower themselves to take charge of their own careers and do the things that they need to do to elevate themselves, give them the self-confidence to be doing these things. One of the things that I was most impressed with WEFA was really even everything down to they'd have women come in and speak to other women, and they would pay them for doing it, things like that. So
Right.
the element of like, don't be giving this out for free. So bringing in some of the business skills and how to really like elevate yourself and take like control of these and just grab things by the hands and use it to elevate yourself and move yourself forward was a huge part of that. And when I think about it personally, I look back at all of the bosses and the mentors and everything I've had in my life, and I had many, many good bosses and mentors pushing me along the way. When I truly look at it, for me, it was other women who they understood my perspective. They understood maybe when I started understanding that, I'm sitting in a room and maybe felt like I got talked over or I said something and it didn't really land. And then 5 minutes later, I'm like, wait, why does somebody else just say the same thing that I said? And it's different this time. So having that element and people who, understood the perspective was and still is so important as we're, going through our careers and trying to elevate ourselves into leadership positions.
Yeah. I mean, you both mentioned like the networking piece there as well. I mean, I think it's interesting. Tom, we're quite recently research some research around how it's different. Men network differently by research from women, and we can kind of see that in normal life, right? And to your point of mentoring and coaching is, when you want to follow someone's career path, you kind of need to have a sense of, can I follow that career path? And it's definitely an interesting one. I mean, I'm very lucky that most of my career I've had phenomenal male and female, mentors and I suppose ambassadors and sponsors and so on. And I think what I'd love to be able to do, and like what I know we're all doing, is starting to increase that number of mentors and increase that number of sponsors. And again, going back to gender balance, right? Making sure that they're at all levels. So let's go on to mentoring for a second, because both of you guys are mentoring, right, and coaching. So Madeline, you obviously are with the foundation right now, the family care in Cleo, and there's obviously a body of work there because it's a very complex space, and I'm appreciative of the sandwich generation. This is something I don't think we've really had as much before, or maybe we have. Give me some context around the sandwich generation. And again, from a gender balance perspective, is it gender balanced? What's the statistics? What's the stats? What's the landscape? Because my assumption is it's not. But am I wrong? Please tell me I'm wrong.
Wrong, unfortunately. However, it is really changing. So many more um, men coming into the equation and helping support in ways that we've never seen before. So that is a really positive thing. But this sandwich, generation, if you're not familiar with it, is really, it's hitting, primarily people in their 30s, 40s, something like that. So you're having a baby, having multiple children, so you're caring for them, which is a huge life transition. And then on the flip side of that, we're watching this thing happen where we're starting to become parents later on in life. And so now our parents are, getting illnesses, getting sick. And all of a sudden, we're taking care of both sides of the equation. So a lot of the people I work with are dealing with this. The burnout that comes as a result of all this care for everyone else around you is really takes its toll. I can't give you the exact statistic, but it was the last time I had looked into it. It's upwards of, like, I want to say 70% of people end up actually, like, quitting their jobs because they can't handle all the pressure of doing all of that at the same time.
And is that the difference? I mean, if you think about, a couple of decades previously, I mean, there probably was still the idea of a sandwich generation of taking care of everyone, but the job possibly wasn't in the mix, which is, full-time career in the mix, right? So that's really the caveat. That's the difference.
So all of the, the wonderful push for women getting to have roles and take on leadership positions. So
Right.
we've done all these things to fight to have these, and the problem is now the support is lacking. And what we traditionally saw, what I even saw when I grew up, both of my parents worked. However, my mother was the one who was setting up all the doctor's appointments, getting all the groceries, making dinner every night, cleaning up the dishes, making sure we got our homework done.
Right.
And so you can see the load that kind of sits on primarily women's shoulders as a result.
Right. We've tried to do everything. We're like, and I say I'm not in this equation. I chose not to have kids because I was like, I know I'm not as organized as having the ability to do absolutely everything. I'm going to choose one of these things has to give. And kids was it. Totally fine with it. So, but yeah, the idea that you can be a full-time job as a parent, full-time job in a career professional, and do all of the domestic chores and mind other adults at the same time and pick up the healthcare. I mean, it's just, I just don't even think anyone copes with it. So burnout is the obvious word.
Tom said he's the all or nothing. And most people that I talk to, and myself included, we are all or nothing with all of these things. So all of a sudden we're, trying to give 100% towards our job and be this working professional. And we're trying to give 100% into this parenting thing. We're trying to give 100% back to our parent. Like, obviously that's not solid math. So you see this happening more and more, and you bring it back to, what the collective focus is on. Like, part of this, our health suffers just immensely because we push that aside.
Yeah. It's not urgent right now because I've started off this journey, for example, when you're healthy, and then of course you don't realize that health and ill health comes over time. Tom, do you see the same in the UK? I mean, I'm pretty sure Ireland is the same, but UK and around the world, you've obviously been Denmark and so on.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of conversations with people about this, and I'm a huge promoter of people in general being given more opportunities. Of course, in this instance, women who have been treated unfairly for a long, long time in all aspects. I think the thing for me, and something why I think coaching is so important as an example of mentoring, is the expansion of the role of a woman, which is super positive, and the opportunities, whether it be in sport or work or leadership or whatever, is so necessary and so incredible. But we've almost missed the piece where we've reflected on what the role of women used to be, and it did used to be so gender, and still is to an extent, but that's what it was. So the diversification of the role of a woman is fantastic, and I think we should continue to push that, and the opportunities and the benefits it brings is so clear, so clear.
Yeah.
The changing role of a man is something we need to be more open to discussing, and there needs to be more help for the role of a man, because a lot of men do perhaps want to be a stay-at-home dad, and they want to play the old stereotypical role of a female. We're not really taught how to do that. We don't have the role model because that wasn't how it was. That wasn't how my
Yeah.
dad or my granddad or anything else used to be. He used to come home, dinner was on the table, and the woman had done all of this stuff that we would never dream of doing, and that's how it was. So I think we're in this place now where, rightly so, the emphasis is on the woman and females and the opportunities and the skills and the vast improvements we're bringing to almost all assets of life. From a male perspective, I want us to be more open to being coached and being given more feedback on how we can play the other role and move out of the mindset of you need to be the breadwinner or you need to, all the historical stuff that came with being a man. Men can't equally do both. So if you're going to be more kind of, involved at home with whether it be with kids or whether it just be in a different domestic role, then that needs to be coached and taught for those people because we equally don't have role models to know how to do that. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
and it's kind of just flipping it, but we don't want to take the emphasis off the nature of more opportunities and growth for women, but I think there needs to be more conversations around the role of a modern man, whether
Yeah.
it be in life or relationships or families or the workplace, and us being okay with that. And I think the mentoring side of things, one thing we really try and do is like, who is the right person to guide you at this time? And I'm a white man, so I'm often sat there like, I'm all for diversity and inclusion and really trying to broaden that scope. But I'm a white man and there's a little bit of self-preservation and opportunity and all that kind of stuff. So how do I get that balance right?
Yeah.
Who teaches me to get that balance right? And someone said to me, well, you're always thinking about it, so you're always going to be on the right side of it. And I probably will be, but that's through personality and my experiences, not through what I've been taught.
Right.
So that role definition and how do we define those two roles? And I think it was um crikey, this is gonna be terrible that I forgot her name, the apprentice West Ham owner. Oh, what's her name, Grace?
West Ham
Super
owner. I don't even follow football.
Superwoman. She was on the board for West Ham. She's one of Alan Sugar's apprentice.
Okay. Not a clue.
And she delivered a really good, I think it was a Diary of a CEO piece. And what she essentially said was her partner was a footballer, but she was actually more of the breadwinner, being a businesswoman and being on a board at West Ham and stuff like that. And she said, we just had to figure out what the different roles were. And that was when I was filming for The Apprentice. I was working 18-hour, 20-hour days. His family were in Canada, so he would go home for 3 weeks. He would take the kids, he would manage that. I would do my job. I would go and get my 4 hours sleep a night. And there would be little bits and pieces that he'd do, like just make sure the car had fuel in it, for example, because I just didn't have time to do it. I don't need
Right.
flowers. I don't like flowers. It's none of that stuff. Just the car having fuel and it was great. And him taking the kids away for 3 weeks let me do my job.
Yeah.
Like there's a
Yeah.
great example of where some of the challenges she went through with being one of the first females on a board in a very male-dominated and
Mm.
horrible environment for females, I can imagine. I've still been involved in it. It's still that way. She said we just figured out what the redefinition of our roles were in that relationship. And when his football career came to an end, he stopped working. I became the breadwinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had good finances because he was a footballer, but also because of my successful business career. And we just had to be very open and play into that transition. And that was great for them. I don't see too many other examples of that and people talking about that publicly. And I think
Yeah.
that is something that I would like to see more of. For
Yeah.
relationships, for roles, and how people can be more comfortable in what their roles are going to be for their own situations.
And that's exactly it. It's their own situations, right? I think what you're saying there is all the options on the table should be on the
Yeah,
table. And then depending on the relationship and the couple and the careers and the location and their, family or not, then people can choose what's right for them. And that's the beauty of it, I think, is to your point, is there's plenty of stay-at-home dads, but do we see all the stories? We don't. Do we? And also was talking recently, to lots of men around being dads and girls, and now realizing, oh wait, the world is different. And I'm like, come on the journey, be part of the solution. Like this is the beauty of it now is there's more awareness and talk, but we do need to highlight more of there's many ways of having, a functioning household with two careers or one career or a family but there has to be all these options on the table. And like, I think it's going back to that everything is an optional, and it could be that you choose one thing and you choose something else at a different time.
yeah,
Stage of life will change. all that stuff will change. So keeping all the options on the table is really what we're looking at.
And I'd be really, really interested to see what impact that had on, at the moment we're pushing women, pushing women, pushing women, take opportunities, be brave, be bold, which is fantastic. But we're not educating men on how you can step back a little bit, because everybody, you still can't have those men in those roles and opportunities and the women in roles and opportunities. There needs to be a bit of a balancing act there. So how can we support and encourage men to be like, actually, I'm feeling a bit burnt out. Maybe I should take a step back, or I'm super busy. Maybe I want to do something different in my role as a person or as a partner or as a dad or whatever. How can we change that narrative a bit? And if you had more men who were more comfortable in doing that, you would organically create more opportunities that,
Right.
perhaps more women who are like, great, I'm ready for this. I want to be a leader. I want to go and do this. And you would change that narrative a little bit. You need people to give up those roles and opportunities, be comfortable doing that. And inevitably, it's white men globally that own the majority of that stuff. So again, how
Yeah,
do
the
we plan and how
balance.
do we help that piece?
Yeah, we got to get to the balance. And then thankfully, I mean, I'm lucky that I got one or two white men leaders that are great mentors as well. So there's plenty of opportunity for to leverage the skill set, the experience, the knowledge, and it to be better towards balance. Yeah, there's you think about that for sure. When you're mentoring, Tom, you mentioned about Sheffield there, for example. Are you mentoring mainly in the world of health and healthcare and Quiddity and all of that space? And really, it's for professionals, not in the sporting sector, but more in the healthcare sector and tech.
A little bit of both. So, mentored a bunch of young referees previously. Within business, I work for a company called Bite Labs, who essentially look to expose clinicians, medics, people from other careers to the world of business and being a founder and what that looks like. I'm not a founder, but I've worked with a lot of founders, so I've got a good grasp of what kind of pressures they're under. So the majority of it is I guess kind of opening people's eyes to that,
Mm,
but also. I guess the mentoring piece, I think sometimes comes across as quite guided, but I think for me also just the kind of coaching support piece that comes along with the stresses of life as it exists today. I think it is more and more stressful and more expectation. People are busier and busier and what
yeah,
have you. How do you deal with all of those things? Having someone to talk to that can make sense of that, that's got a variety of experiences we all have, that can just draw on those different things to help drive people forwards. And I guess whatever that environment is, whether it be sport, whether it be work and industry or just with personal lives, I've got a real passion for making sure people feel like they've got an outlet, which, often for white men can't be family or parents or your mum or your dad or whatever, because of what we've been built to be over a long period of time. Um, who's that other person? And Grace, we've had similar chats to this
yeah,
before, where I've been quite open with you about things, and having those other mechanisms for outlets and support and guidance is just super helpful for me.
super
So
helpful. Yeah, and we've all been there. Madeline, you're also coaching, right? And have done a body of work there as well.
Yes. So I actually primarily do that in my, we'll say, it's about 8 to 7 hours, something like that. Trying to take this flexible multi-portfolio
Yeah,
work
no
style.
burnout.
Yeah. That's been interesting. It's been an interesting test of the things that I talk to people about, to be honest with you. And you start feeling it and then you're like, wait a minute, I know better. But so I mentioned I work kind of with two camps of people. People have been laid off. So all of a sudden they find themselves without a job and trying to figure out what's next. And it comes with a huge bag of emotions, we'll say, sometimes very positive, sometimes so much regret and things that they've talked about. I gave my whole life up for this job. My identity is completely wrapped up in it. So kind of helping work through that. And I mentioned on the other side with Cleo, it's families and caregivers, but many of the things we all face, kind of as Tom said, I find that people really are just looking for someone to almost, it's a sounding board a lot of times. It's someone who can relate even to what they're going through, so they know they're not alone. Be their thoughts, imposter syndrome comes up a lot, just having a
Right.
lot of self-doubt, things like that. Just having someone to talk to and understand, and it's, there's no judgment there, those sorts of things, is it truly helps people. And coaching in itself is very transformative in nature. So you come in and you're really looking to add, improve, change something about your current situation. and getting to kind of guide and help people through that in a very like independent, they're doing this on their own, is really, really impactful. And it really fills your cup up in a completely different way. So
Great to hear it from a coach's perspective, because thankfully lots of us have been through coaching and we appreciate the impact and the value, and definitely that support is huge. But coming from a coach as well and hearing the positivity is great. And unfortunately, we're in a time, talking about being laid off, the US system and federal layoffs have been obviously extensive in the last few weeks and months. And Tom, we were obviously just talking earlier on around the NHS and NHS England getting cut as well. So we're in a time where there's a lot of government employees, which would typically have been seen as a safe place to be working, where it's harder to get in than get out. Whereas obviously now there's thousands of people in many countries being laid off. Madeline, what are you happy to share and talk about in relation to some of the US changes, and that you must be in high demand right now?
yes, to your point, a lot of the people that this is affecting didn't foresee this happening. To your point, those are roles that traditionally have been incredibly stable. It's also happening in other industries. That biotech is a huge one, just tons of change happening, layoffs. The tech space is another one. Seeing it more and more and more. And when I mentioned kind of, there's so much around getting laid off, even though it's very common now, more often than not, everyone's going to get laid off at least once in their career span. But there's still stigmas around it and things like that too. And it often turns out, what did I do wrong here? A lot of that sort of thing happening. And then the other piece of it is people don't know where they want to go next. And it almost feels like a loss of part of their identity, if you will. And I think that is a lot of what I work with people on and kind of try to help them navigate through, is understanding and maybe realigning with, I'll call it their higher purpose, just in life in general, and using that to kind of guide them in what comes next. And along the way, networking and how do I connect with people for new opportunities, and building up those sorts of skills to kind of help them get to wherever it is they want to go next. So that's a lot of what I see though in that side of things.
Yeah, that transition, that reset is hard. It's hard. And like, as you said, we've all been there at some point, right? And or as we all will be at some point, which is kind of mad as I think about this is the world we live in as well. Tom, when you're thinking about the, Quiddity and the other roles that you're involved with, and you mentioned Femtech and some of the partners there, what's the most exciting part of it? Because now that you're in the Quiddity since 2023, correct?
Yep.
So you're in this one quite a while. What's the most exciting piece now that you've reset and transitioned?
Yeah, I mean, we get to see all of the exciting stuff that people are wanting to build, and solutions to problems. I mean, whether those problems really exist from a healthcare perspective or whether they're perceived problems is a different story. But to see people of all walks and shapes of life, whether it be people wanting to create an app specifically for people with disabilities to do effective gym work, for example, at home, stuff like that, which is quite niche, but just doesn't exist anywhere. Through to, we work with an infant feeding coaching solution, which was built by somebody who designed some of the Marvel characters, the founders that have won Oscars and BAFTAs, and are now designing, health tech solutions to help support parents initiate and continue with feeding, is just mind blowing. Like, to see that passion and creativity and potential of all of that stuff is just, that's the best part of the job for sure. I think that, there are a lot of challenges that come with that, in terms of having those great ideas, building great stuff, and being able to commercialize them, and having people want to buy them or need to buy them is a slightly different piece, and it's where a lot of great business coaches and mentors and what have you really kind of come into their own. But that piece around seeing people kind of follow their dreams, build what they never thought they could do from a product or a solution perspective, but also with their own journey, becoming a founder of a business and leading however many people, whether it's a couple of people or whether it's hundreds or thousands. That's really, really cool. And something that, we get a lot from.
You mentioned femtech earlier on as well. Are you seeing more? I'm assuming again, correct me if I'm wrong. We're seeing more female founders in the femtech space, or are you seeing a balance across the remit in healthcare? Give me some of the stats from a gender balance perspective.
Yeah, so it's definitely improving. I think, there are some horror stories of stats still in terms of the percentage of VC funding that's going to female founders or founders from ethnic minorities, which is, just mind-blowingly frustrating for all of us because there's no reason for that other than the color of their skin or their gender.
Yeah,
The
the
products
bias
they're
on the VC
building,
side. Yeah.
yeah, the products they're building are just as good, if not better. But the funding isn't flowing. So, that's a big frustration for us because it's nothing to do with the quality of the solutions. So we are still very, very far behind in that respect. Um, what I would say is, we're talking about undoing hundreds, thousands of years of humanity and development and growth. It's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
So, an element of understanding of that is important. It takes almost generations of people being phased out to create those new
Hmm.
opportunities for people that are as open as and as educated is the wrong word, but open to change and challenge as
Experiences.
we are exactly. So, that's not an overnight thing. That's a decades thing to get us to a point of equity, I think. However, it takes people again being brave and bold and changing the narrative, and you get great people. I mean, Deirdre O'Neill at Fertility is one that they've been brave and bold
Yeah.
and have really gone out there with some of the stuff they're doing, and whether it's a bit too much or whether it's the right side of the fence, you need to push those boundaries to, because you're never going to go from this straight to 50-50. There's always going to be a bit of
Yeah.
rebalancing where you need to go a little bit too far. Okay, now we need to settle into what the norm and what the accepted space is. And Grace, of course, you've done that with some of the work that you've done with different businesses and have a good example of that. So yeah, I think we just need to keep pushing the narrative, keep making sure that the skill sets are there, the fundamentals of people are there in an equitable way. And then, as more, for example, with VC companies, male dominated, there'll be more women that take those roles. There'll be
Right.
more opportunities there. It then starts to, the kind of flywheel really starts to move. So, yeah, moving in the right direction, but still some horror stats in
Yeah.
terms of particularly funding for.
And I'm hoping that you're wrong in relation to the generations factor, because to your point, yes, it can change. But we do need more women at the VC table. So if anyone listening, if you're in that finance or that space, we VC, step up, step in, go for it. Likewise, from founders, yeah, there's obviously less female founders than male founders, regardless of funding, even before you get to that point. So there's definitely more of go for it. If you have a challenge and a problem, try it. Like, I mean, at the moment, 90% of startups fail. So there's a little bit of just go for it anyway. The element of you can try it, and to your point is if we can get a diverse VC or a diverse board, then a diverse go-to-market strategy, then hopefully, that the solutions get through to the population who's going to be those serving for. But yeah, lots of change needed. Some stepping up and some being willing to step down. A combination of both, or at least to sit alongside in order to make sure that we're getting that experience and diverse experience at the table and diverse mindset and skills and so on. Madeline, when you think about the landscape in the US and the reset, I suppose it's happening, and it is definitely a reset, right? That's happening in an awful long lot way. What would be the lessons and what would be the ideas that you would like to see happen? Are the lessons that you would like people that are also coming up along the journey of health or in working in the space that you work in, and the lessons that you've learned from your career that you think would apply or should apply today?
Oh, that is a really good question. Uh, to be honest, what I'm witnessing right now is really hard to watch in many ways. It's the whole mentality of one step forward, 10 steps back type of approach that I feel that I'm watching from afar. However, people are still working on these initiatives. People still care. And there's really good things happening at the community level, the individual level, with a lot of this work. So it's not gone. However, I think now more than ever before, it's important for people to start getting involved in maybe it's community initiatives, maybe it's the mentoring space, maybe someone stepping up for more of this venture capital thing. We need the voices and the representation now more than ever before, so that we don't lose all the progress that we've made. And if I take that step back, one of my lessons learned, change is really hard. And I think that some of what I'm seeing is maybe we pushed a little bit too hard. And so we're seeing a little bit of that bounce back effect where people aren't quite ready for some of the progress that was happening in the country. And it's really about working to understand how people maybe on the other side of the fence, what are they experiencing? What are they feeling? What's causing them to not want these things? So getting that other perspective is really important. And also not losing sight of, some of the work I've done, for instance, and things like that. You mentioned it is a dirty word now. I work with many people who got fired from jobs in DEI and things like that, and they're almost ashamed, and they don't know how to keep going with that work. But it's really important when I talk about understanding what your purpose is and really like the impact that you want to leave for the people around you, and kind of aligning with that. And even if it's not the same as maybe what you were doing yesterday, finding those little things that we can all do to keep going, to be honest. It's a lot of how I'm trying to look at it right now.
I love it. I like that. I like that approach. Tom, what's the lessons from your side? Someone that's looking at, your career and all that you're doing. What's the lesson that you would like to share so they can hopefully avoid the pitfalls, but also maximize and capitalize on the lessons?
I think there's so much externally at the moment that's noise and challenge and everything else. One of the best things that I've ever done was I read a book, Man's Search for Meaning, a great book. If you haven't read it, I'd highly recommend it. The whole tune of it is you've got to understand yourself first and foremost. You've got to do a lot of work on understanding who you are, what your triggers are. We're not all perfect. We've all got different challenges, we're all different people. Learn to be your best version with all of those circumstances, and then all of the external noise, a lot of it can move away. And you talk about people are fired from certain roles. If that's particularly challenging for individuals, my guess would generally be there's you're tying yourself and your identity to that role and to what you've done, or to that business and to that purpose, which is great. And I'm very guilty of that. I'm, again, all or nothing. I'm bought into what I do, but reality of it is those are external factors you're not always going to be in control of. The government can fire their workforce. You can be made redundant. All of these things can happen, and there's not really much you can do about it. If you're confident with who you are, what you're doing, you wake up and you be like, this is me and this is what I'm doing, and I'm being genuine and honest with myself, and I'm giving that to whatever environment I'm in. Doesn't matter so much about those external factors. You can wake up comfortable, and you can wake up knowing that, okay, this has happened. These external factors are what they are. I'm going to move on to the next thing, because that clearly wasn't right. That wasn't my home. That wasn't where I'm going to be the best version of me. And it's that self-comfort and self-work that I think most people, and I would say most people, are not willing to do that, uncover those hard truths. Therapy is something that I think everyone should go through as an example, like whether you call it therapy or coaching or different bits and pieces. Self-discovery, really knowing deeply who you are. The whole thing, who are you when no one's looking? How do you act? How do you behave on a consistent basis? What's that common thread of your life that's going to be there? And regardless of what role you're in, or whether you're family or not, or role definition or job title or company, that consistent thread's still there. And the more we can stay tied to that, better we're going to be.
Love it. Yeah, no, I'm with you on the therapy side as well, whether we call it mentoring or therapy or coaching or whatever. Knowing yourself through any one of those solutions and working with an external neutral party is worth its weight in gold, right? Worth its weight in gold. For anyone who's not using a mentor or coach or a therapist, get one. It's absolutely worth its weight in gold. So I love that. Great shout out. And we could talk about that all day. We absolutely could talk about all of that stuff all day, and all the tools and the ways that we've done it and the ways that we failed and succeeded, and the opportunities that everyone should be aware of. But last question, because I'm conscious that we literally could talk about this all day. When we talk about the other leaders that you guys are working with, or the impact that you're leaving in the space along with other leaders, call out or spotlight one or two others for me, emerging or established leaders that we should all be either looking or watching out for, or also just being aware of. I appreciate that part of the purpose of the podcast is breaking down the silos of the sectors across health and fitness and tech and all of that good stuff, but also breaking down the silos across the geography of the world as well, knowing that we are all homogenous in one little way. So tell me, give me some of those spotlights. Maybe Madeline, do you want to go first? Who should I be watching out for? Who should I know? Who should I be following?
Yeah, I thought about this before we jumped on today. So two people came to mind. Sabrina Joe, who she's a former colleague of mine from the American Council on Exercise. I love everything about her. She has really embraced life and her unique self, I guess is the best way to put it. She still works for ACE. She is on the science side of things. She got her PhD a couple of years ago, just because she wanted to type of situation. And she's one of those people where you talk to her and you feel good, is the best way to kind of put that. But she's doing really great things, focusing now a lot on older adults and how to stay active and healthy kind of in those next stages of life. So I know that's one of her kind of passion
Love it.
areas, if you will. And then the other person that came to mind, to your point, like trying to bring not just women into this conversation, Tom Richards. He was a former boss of mine. He's still a mentor. He actually he married my husband and I, so he became a really close friend of ours too. He is one of those people that will stay with me, I hope, for the rest of my life, to be honest. He left, ended his full-time job, corporate role, and he went off and he started his own business. So now he does advisory work for companies and health and wellness policy space. He's just a really great human, and he knows so much, and he really like impacts everything he touches in a very, very, very positive way. So I would call on both of those
Great.
people to take part in this, and I know they'd support.
Two great shout outs. I love it. And I love the fact that Sabrina just went into the PhD. I've got aspirations to be called Dr. Grace at some point. So I might pick up that thread going, how did she do that while still working full time and living her life? So we'll come back to that one. Tom, who would you like to spotlight? Who should I be following? Who should I know?
I think that the first one that comes to mind, a lady called Ahuti Rai. She was one of the first people that I spoke to when I joined Lever, moved into the digital health sphere. She actually wasn't in the digital health sphere at the time, so we have a very shared kind of start of that journey. But she's yeah, first and foremost incredibly successful woman, but a woman from minority ethnic background. She's now got multiple board seats as chairs in digital health companies. Probably one of the most liked and respected, but most intelligent and just generally across the board, high skilled people I've ever met. So I think she's definitely one that I'd say the way she's gone about it, everything is so sharp with her, despite all of the standard things. She is a woman that's working in investment and funding for different products. So she's great. I think secondly, I mean my current boss, I have to say, a guy called Gav Matthews. Part of the reason I moved across to Quiddity was him and the vision and mission he set, and the company is built out to be super sustainable, super diverse, super inclusive, and everything we do really tries to live and breathe by that. And he's a guy that is just a server. He's just everything you ask him at any point, he'll do it, which I'm sure he'll say is probably a bit of a weakness as well. But proper role model in terms of a guy that's built out a business, does it in the right way, always smiles, clearly has challenges with it, of course, like everyone else, but will always shelter you from that as best as he can, and will always give you the time you need. So I think on a day-to-day basis, that's I'm super wedded to him and what he's doing as much as the mission, the vision of the company and the broader set. So those two people who are really close friends of mine now, are doing some really cool things. So
Love it. And again, like amazing. This is the beauty of the podcast for me, is getting introductions and hearing about these great people doing great, great things that I may not know about or others may not know about as well. So yeah, rising tide raises all boats, I say. And if we can push on and support people in the world of health, then it can only lead to better things for a healthier world. So a win-win-win, hopefully. Guys, thank you so much for sharing so much. You've both got amazing careers and very diverse backgrounds, as well as very, very diverse current situations as well, right, in terms of multiple roles. So it is great. And I think everyone listening will take away the lessons that you shared, as well as just the inspiration from what you've done and how you both dedicated yourself to being helpful to the world. So again, thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I look forward to reconnecting with more of yourselves in person over the next couple of months, hopefully. I know we have Tom will definitely be in the UK, and Madeline, I've no excuse not to get to San Diego, so it's definitely on my list for the summer. Of the sunblock ready. So we shall see you there. But again, thank you guys. Keep doing what you're doing, and I look forward to following up with you again.
Thanks, Grace.
Thank you.